This is probably the second Georgian movie I've ever seen, the first one being And Then We Danced, which was actually pretty good. But this one I had a suspicion might be a little bit more challenging. For the very simple reason that the synopsis for the movie told me that, well, it's about a community of Jehovah's Witnesses, and the truth of the matter is, my personal, albeit very limited experience with Jehovah's Witnesses hasn't been all that positive. And basically every story I've ever heard from the former members has ranged from bad to horrific. So my view on the group wasn't exactly something that was gonna help me, if the movie asked me to sympathize with or root for members of said group. But I decided I wasn't gonna let that stop me because something about this just looked compelling. And from the very first scene, I would say this one did a good job of getting me on the side of the protagonist. Because what a great opening scene it was. It really took me by surprise. And just made me go, wow. And that's not a bad way to start a movie. But the basic premise here is that we follow this family, or more like the wife and mother, to be honest, because she is very much the driving force of the movie and the central character. And what the movie does very cleverly is to make this a very human story with her in focus. And while the fact that she's a Jehovah's Witness does play an important part in the story, it's not the focus of the story, it actually feels more like a plot device. And in essence, I guess it could basically be any other religious belief as well. Or any minority for that matter. It doesn't really matter or make much of a difference, but what matters here is the main character. And her struggles and her journey as she and her family come into, let's say, some conflict with the locals. And what makes this, for me at least, a particularly interesting film is that in many ways it is a stunning, impactful and powerful movie. But in some ways I also couldn't help but to feel like it needed some really heavy editing. Because this is a slow and quiet movie, and I do mean slow and quiet. It's over 2 hours in runtime, and a lot of that is thanks to the way it was shot and edited. Not because of the story, this same exact story could have been told in a much more condensed form. And I guess you could call it a stylistic choice to have very long scenes, usually shot with a static camera that most of the time didn't move. And while those shots were usually very well composed and framed, the fact of the matter is that quite a few scenes could have been significantly shorter or cut entirely. Because there were so many scenes that just went on for minutes where basically nothing happens. And I was actually sitting there trying to figure out what the purpose it was they served. And while you could always make an argument for some purpose, many of them felt more or less pointless to me. And if you felt the need to include them for some context, that's fine, but there's no need for them to just go on for that long. Which is really my biggest issue with this movie and the main reason I'm pretty torn about it. Because there are also a number of genuinely excellent scenes in this as well. Scenes that are just incredibly well done, intense and kind of remarkable. But in between these scenes there's just so much of nothing going on. Minutes and minutes that go by that made me ask myself, why am I still watching this? And then of course another great scene came around and I got an answer to that question. So for me this was very much a mixed bag where sometimes I was genuinely bored and at other times highly impressed. And then there's of course the ending that kinda left me scratching my head. Because it certainly took a strange turn there, and while I do have some ideas of what it meant, I'm not convinced I got it right. But yeah, all in all, I definitely can't call this a bad film, and I'm gonna have to give it a high 6. Boop. And I could see people absolutely hating this, or loving it too, but I'm stuck somewhere in the middle. So if you got patience and don't mind a slow and quiet movie, I would say check this one out. Otherwise, probably skip it. Or don't. After all, I'm not your dad. But hey, what are your thoughts on this? Have you seen it? Did you like it? Let me know. And if you enjoyed the video, maybe give it a thumbs up or sub to the channel because that would be fantastic.